Hey guys, welcome to Limelight, where eventually I'm hoping to shed light on everything Lyme. So this being video number 1, I think is appropriate to start with my Lyme story. I'm sure that all of us have all of us do have a Lyme story. And so basically this first video, this is just going to be my Lyme story. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to tell you about my story, how Lyme has, affected me, how it hit me when I found out that I had Lyme, what was going on, and then where I'm at now. So if you've stumbled across this video, maybe it's because you or somebody you know thinks that you might have Lyme. Lyme disease is, it's a little bit, it's a little bit elusive. It's very difficult to diagnose. Sometimes there has to be just a clinical diagnosis, which means you're just basically having a doctor say that they believe that you have Lyme's based off of your symptoms, not off of any affirmative tests. So there are tests, of course, that can be done, a blood test that measures titers or something like that in your blood, and where apparently they can get a definitive positive, but oftentimes somebody can have Lyme and it still comes up negative. So I just encourage you, and with your story, wherever you're at, whatever you're dealing with, if you suspect that you might have Lyme's, don't necessarily rely on the doctors to say yes or no, because doctors are honestly not even oftentimes able or capable of giving a definitive yes or no. And so for me, I was kind of fortunate, I guess. I did get a definitive yes, and I'll kind of go through that and how that came about. But so I'll just rewind the clock here. About 2.5 years. It's been, has it been 2.5 years? Year and a half. So as of the date of this video, it's January 16th, 2024. And I discovered that I had Lyme in 2022, that summer, June, July. And my symptoms started that April prior to that. So April of 2022, basically I woke up with back pain. The back pain was in my lower back. It wasn't anything that I really thought too much about or was worried about. I actually had my yearly checkup at my doctor that day that I woke up with that back pain, and I kind of just chalked it up to work related. So the day before at work, I was operating a laser cutter machine, and so I was constantly like lifting up the door and closing it. And so I just figured that I had strained my back. I've strained my back before, kind of similarly in the past, and it usually just goes away. So at my checkup in the doctor's office, I didn't even bring up my back pain. I didn't even talk about it. But that back pain didn't really go away. So after a number of weeks and still dealing with this back pain and it getting worse, I started seeking some help. I actually went to a chiropractor. I started having adjustments done a couple times a week, I believe, or once a week. And I didn't really feel like that was helping either. So this whole time I felt like there was something going on with my back. I had back pain and I didn't know what it was. During this time, I was actually training for my second Spartan race. So the year before that, I ran my first Spartan race. I was 41 years old when I ran it, and it was just the best time I've ever had. I prepared for it. My wife got me this entry for Christmas, and so I spent from Christmas all the way up to that May or whatever training for my first Spartan, and it was the most fun I've ever had. Super challenging, of course, but super thrilling. And so this was the following year. I decided to do that same Spartan again. It's the Spartan that they do in Montana, right there by the Flathead Lake every year. And I was super stoked. I was super excited for it. So the weekend prior to my back hurting, actually, I was running with my daughter. So I ran 10 miles with my daughter that weekend. And I was in great shape. I was feeling really good. I was super excited for the upcoming race. And then this back pain happened, April 6th, 2022. And that back pain, like I said, persisted to the point where I was in the chiropractor office. They actually did an x-ray. Didn't really find anything, some curvature of the back, but fairly typical. And then after continued chiropractic work and just continued pain, I started seeking more help from my primary doctor. They didn't really know what to do or say anything. They kind of, gave me probably some back painkillers or something like that. And eventually, though, I did end up getting a CT scan, and it did show that I had a fracture of one of my vertebrae in my back. So at that point, I thought that was it. Oh my gosh, I've got a broken back. This must have been when I was, walking into the gym one day and slipped on the ice. I didn't realize that it was, broke my back. And so that's what I was thinking. But then I ended up going to a back specialist. So here locally, I went and we've got a pretty good back doctor, spine specialist. And he said this is pretty atypical. He said these small fractures are pretty common in people and that this should not be the cause of my pain. And by this point, I was in a lot of pain daily. I was having a hard time just getting around and walking. And I was starting to experience some other symptoms as well, not just back pain, but it was starting to spasm down my back, down my arms, down my legs. And so at this point, I was fairly concerned. Walking into that, back specialist appointment, I was fully confident that, I just had a broken back, a broken bone, and that hopefully they could help me fix it. During that CT scan, they also found some tightening of my neck, right there at the spinal cord, which I guess the spine specialist also said was fairly typical. Prior to this appointment, I was kind of imagining that I was going to have to go into some sort of a surgery to have that opened up or have them work on my back or do something. But I walked out of that back appointment fairly discouraged, actually, because from what the doctor was saying, none of my pain could be attributed to what he was seeing in any of the x-rays. And he wasn't sure why my back was hurting as bad as it was. So at this point too, like I said, I was having the spasms, muscle spasms. It started turning into nerve pain. And the nerve pain was pretty bad. Nerve pain down my arms and my legs. And I just started getting really shaky. So unfortunately, I was unable to race that Spartan race that year. I still ended up going out there with a couple of my kids and my brother because I already had a room reserved. I was fully ready for the Spartan race prior to this back pain. And then so I couldn't bear the thought of just not going at all. So I don't know if it was just good that I went though, because it was probably just made me feel worse, But we rolled out there, and I just kind of hung out and walked a little bit of the course that day because I couldn't participate. My back was just still hurting too bad. I was having all sorts of weird nerve pain and stuff too, and so then I'm back in town and still trying to figure out what's going on with my back pain. So I just kept making appointments with my primary. They just kept trying different things. They started putting me on medication, and due to my nerve pain, they started giving me things like gabapentin. And the whole time, during this whole time, I was also just getting kind of fuzzy in my thoughts and my mind. I couldn't really think straight. I couldn't really function, top notch at all. Let's see. So at some point, so Mother's Day. So I remember Mother's Day. I was with my wife and my kids, and I remember having chest pain. So it felt like somebody had put a rope around my chest and was tugging real hard. And so that kind of freaked me out when I started having chest pain. It was probably around that same time I had what probably, what probably was a full-on like anxiety attack, where I basically, my whole body just kind of became numb. My heart was racing, chest pain, and almost like fuzzy around, my eyes and stuff. And so all of these symptoms continued to progress. So that was April. We're into May now. Towards the end of May, so Mother's Day, maybe that's even June. So going into June, and things are just getting worse and worse. My back pain becomes almost completely unbearable. It feels like somebody's taking a drill to my spine and just like jamming that drill bit into my spine over and over and over. And the nerve pain is getting worse and worse too, where I just have like not just tingles, but like pain just fluctuating up and down my arms and my legs. So it got to the point finally one evening, I was sitting there and basically shaking and convulsing. By this point, we purchased a lazy boy because I was having a hard time sleeping in bed. And so I was basically sitting in this recliner for probably the better part of a month at this point. My thinking was so unclear. I didn't feel comfortable driving at all. I was just so foggy. So brain fog, of course, now I know. I didn't know it back then, but just suffering from brain fog, and then all these other strange symptoms. It got so bad, the nerve pain, and the shaking and the back pain, that I told my wife I wanted to go into the emergency room. She agreed. We were trying to make this not like a more of a big deal around our kids than what we knew it was. And so I called my brother, and I had my brother come pick me up, and he took me to the hospital. I could hardly walk. And the hospital ended up admitting me. I think it was mainly because I said I was having chest pain, which I was. But they ended up admitting me and running a gamut of tests. And so one of those tests that they did was an MRI. And so I find myself in the hospital. By this point, it's late into the night, 8, 9 o'clock. They started running all kind of blood tests and things. And I think I took another X-ray, CT or something, ultrasound, maybe. But the MRI, big tube, of course. And after that, the doctor comes in and he says, "Well, we did find something. We found lesions on your brain. We believe that you might have MS." And so they admitted me into the hospital, and they started an MS protocol. When I heard that that they believed I had MS, of course, my heart sank. And at the same time, though, I also felt like I wasn't crazy. I felt like all along the way, these other doctors and people were telling me there was no reason for the pain that I was feeling, for the symptoms I was experiencing. So at least now I felt like, here's a doctor who said he has the result of a test, and yes, there's something going on, and it's brain lesions. And so they admitted me into the hospital, and they started a MS protocol, unfortunately, which entailed steroids, a very large dosage of steroids, a regimen of steroids, 1,000 milligrams a day, and the plan was for 5 days. And so I'd spend 5 days in the hospital and do these steroids, and then probably be released. And then they continued to run tests as well. So while I was in the hospital, I think it was the next day, they did a spinal tap. Prior to the spinal tap, they kind of gave me this talk explaining what the procedure was, and then also saying that it was very, very rare, but but sometimes people experience the worst headache of their life. And if that happens, then basically there's a protocol for that and to let them know. And so I had the spinal tap. I got back into my room, and it was probably about an hour later, and I started to have the worst headache of my life. So it was probably, I don't even know how long it was, 6 hours or more. Like I couldn't do anything but just bury my head down and keep my eyes closed. My head hurt so bad. I was basically crying out. This is even with the pain medication that they were giving me, leading up to all of this. I mean, pain medication, they had me taking, they wanted me to be taking gabapentin there for a while. And then I was also, of course, taking like hydrocodone. And then also, there was another one with a D, started with a D. I forget what it was. Some of them felt like they helped. Of course, the painkillers did kind of take some of the edge off of my back pain, but I didn't really want to be taking painkillers, and so I tried not to. But there for weeks and weeks, I had to. Like my wife too. She was encouraging me to do what I needed to do because I wasn't functioning. I literally was in so much pain. I was sitting in that recliner, just a total mess for weeks and weeks. And so back in the hospital, had the spinal tap. Turns out that the thing that happens very, very rarely happened to me, where basically some of that spinal fluid makes its way up to my head. And so for whatever reason, where they did that spinal tap, it was leaking. And so they actually had to pull me back in and kind of do the procedure again, but take some of my blood and then do what they call a blood patch to patch that up on the spine. After they did that, I immediately started feeling better. But so now I'm still sitting in the hospital after a few days thinking I have MS and doing a high dosage of steroids. I remember my wife and my brother came to visit. During their visit, the neurologist came in, and then he started to go over the MRI results. And he was showing, the MRI and the lesions on the brain that were back there, and explaining what they were and how this is kind of atypical with MS, and kind of all these things. And so, I felt just super discouraged and all of that. And while he was there, though, he said that they were going to continue to run tests and do things. And my wife said, well, let's test them for everything. Let's test them for mold. Let's test them for lead. Let's test them for Lyme disease, because we actually had just heard that there was not just one, but 2 or 3 people from our school, where our kids go to school, that had Lyme. So people in or around our kids' school or related to the school in some way that have Lyme. So thank goodness that she did that. That ended up being one of the tests. But this whole time I still was under the belief that I had MS. They were still under the belief that it was MS. For some reason, they didn't give me the 5 days, which I'm grateful for now, but they didn't give me the 5-day protocol of steroids. I ended up being in the hospital for 3 days, so 3 days worth of 1,000 milligrams of steroids, and then they released me. So during my time in the hospital, I was kind of in the intensive care unit, I think, and I just, when I wasn't having that head issue, I just had such a hard time kind of staying still because my back still was hurting, my nerve pain was hurting, and so I'd end up kind of pacing around. I think that they maybe needed the bed or something. They just decided to release me early. And so I left the hospital, and that was kind of it. So I believe I had MS, and I ended my steroid treatment early, which I was, kind of anxious about and uncertain about. And I went home. And then at home, me and my wife, we spent kind of those next few days looking into MS and what that means and the implications. We actually know of a friend of ours that has MS. And so we invited him and his wife over, and we had lunch, and we just discussed, their journey and kind of his treatment and symptoms and protocol. And of course, I was kind of just down in the dumps. And then it was a couple days after that. So I think it was like a total of 5 days after being released from the hospital. I get a call one afternoon, and it's the hospital. I put it on speakerphone. I think I answer it, and she says, hi, I'm a nurse from KMC Hospital, and I'm just calling to let you know that we got some results back from one of your tests, and that you tested positive for Lyme. And I'm like, what? Are you serious? And so I quickly, my wife was right there. I quickly put my phone on speakerphone and asked her, to just repeat that. And she said, you have Lyme disease. And she said it just so definitively. And so I guess I did have a test that came back, the blood test titris. I was able to look back at it, and it showed, positive for Lyme. So that is basically my pre-Lyme story. After discovering that it was Lyme and that I had Lyme, there's also a post-Lyme story to all this. I think I'll save that for the next video, just so that this one's not so long. But that's my Lyme story. I know that it probably differs from a lot of people. It might be fairly similar to others. Ironically, I will just say that I ended up researching Lyme, and specifically the spine and the back and the symptoms that I was having. And I did come across a medical lecture on YouTube where this gal was describing all the different type cases or types of Lyme. And there was one specifically that targeted kind of all of my symptoms precisely. And oddly enough, though, it was one that is more predominant in Europe. But I tried calling our local disease center or whatnot, just to report, hey, I'm another, I'm another number of persons in this area who has Lyme disease. Is that of any interest to you? And they honestly were not interested at all. No follow-up. I thought it might be something they might want to track, but I think that might be an issue too. It seems to not be something that the medical community really not only recognizes, but it'd be nice if they were actually kind of tracking the progression and just geographical area of the spread of this tick-borne, these tick-borne illnesses. But anyways, so that's my Lyme story. Curious what your guys' Lyme story is. I'm definitely going to follow this video up with my post-Lyme journey and my journey, to healing. My journey, of course, continues, but compared to where I was at that summer, I've definitely gotten my life back. I encourage you that if you're in the middle of your, of your struggle, of your challenge with Lyme's, there definitely is hope. There is healing. There is a way. The first thing I'll just say right now, so that you've got something to take away from this, is just pay attention to your diet. First and foremost, get anything inflammatory out of your diet. I actually ate out of a crock pot for over a month, and I think that was really the beginning of my healing. There's of course supplements and some other things too that I'll get into in the next video, but if you can do anything right now, if you're like in the crux of the struggle with Lyme, I would do that. Look up Lyme crock pot diet. You'll probably find something, but you're basically looking to take out all your inflammatory substances and foods, so that your body can basically start to heal. Because if it's inflamed, it can't really heal. So anyways, look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Feel free, leave your story in the comments. I'd love to hear, who's listening and what your guys' experiences were discovering that maybe you or somebody have Lyme. definitely have a whole lot more to share. I've got some thoughts on gestational Lyme, which I think might be my case. And then also just how Lyme is spreading, how to deal with it, how to treat it, how to live with it, and then how to get better and just enjoy life. So I look forward to this. I hope you guys do too. I think this channel is something that you'll gain a lot from. And so I encourage you to subscribe, of course, and continue to look for new videos. And I'll see you in the next one.